Well, it's now my privilege to introduce Jim Hodges. I count Jim as a good friend, and certainly those of you who've heard him speak at our previous Hauenstein Center event know that he has a very compelling story to tell. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring him back. He had spoken in 2006, April of 2006, at the Ford Presidential Museum. Jim adds an authentic voice to the combat history and neuroscience that you have heard. And as you'll figure out as soon as he starts to speak, Jim's from Texas. A lifelong entrepreneur, inventor, and cowboy, he started adult life as a sergeant in the infantry during the Vietnam War. His special op mission in Laos was as harrowing as any movie you have ever seen. In fact, the Hauenstein Center is going to put that presentation from the Ford, where he talks about his special ops mission into Laos, up on YouTube in the near future, so stay tuned to that. For the past 2 decades, Jim has served in a variety of capacities in law enforcement, and it is in that capacity, as well as in his experiences in Southeast Asia, that he has been an authentic witness to the stress of combat. He knows firsthand both the shock of war and the trauma of peace. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jim Hodges.
May need Brian's assistance to get myself turned on here. I don't mean that literally. I mean technically, Brian, technically. I like Brian, but not that much. I want to tell you all. There we go. Thank you very much. Pretty simple for a techno.
You're flipping through all those there, Jim.
Yeah. All right. I want to thank everybody. Hauenstein Center. I'm sorry, I'm hitting the buttons too early here. Getting ahead of myself. Hauenstein Institute, all of the staff, everybody has been really so nice. And being from Texas, I've traveled all over the world. And be very honest with all of you that there's very few places I've ever been where I felt so much at home. And Grand Rapids is just a great place to take the stage tonight with these 2 professionals, and all the work they've done is just phenomenal. And this will be a hard presentation for me to get through, so if you'll bear with me, we'll get through it. And to break the ice, I couldn't bring my horse with me tonight, so I brought some pictures of him. And I'd like to introduce you to a guy that did as much for me in my post-traumatic stress from Vietnam and combat as anybody. And introduce you to Buck the Wonder Horse. And make myself.
One on the left.
All right, there we go. Wrong one. There we go. And there's Buck, and he's practicing good oral hygiene here. Got his UV ray sunglasses on and his ball cap, protecting himself. And you're probably wondering why I brought Buck here. Number one, it helps me feel like I'm at home, and it calms me down just a little bit. And I really need that to relate these topics to you tonight. But more importantly, Buck shared a secret with me and all of the hundreds of thousands of people that have watched us perform together over 6.5 years with the Queen of Thailand, Russian dignitaries from all over the world, and people from around the globe. And he was a great partner. But he and I came together at a point in time where we both needed each other. And, excuse me, this is another picture of Buck here. We were entertaining some school children at the ranch, teaching them about cowboy ranching, the great American cowboy, the relationship of man and horse. And Buck was trained by me to shake his head yes, shake his head no. And I did his voice. So we did hello Wilbur and all those kind of things. And this is Buck performing as a cutting horse in front of the Russian dignitaries that came with the Tsar's Gold exhibit. And a letter from the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo from the top guy, Lewis Bart, the head guy, thanking us for those performances. And the reason why I brought Buck here, I'll show you a little of his funny side, but I'll show you a little of his intensity as well. Because you look at him and you think he's a nice little calm guy. This is a special we did for ESPN when Emmitt Smith from the Dallas Cowboys broke his rushing record. And they compared Emmitt's tenacity with Buck's fever for working cattle. That was his job in life. And here he is, Chris Schwartz from ESPN took this photo of him. And you can see the dust flying. And this cow really aggravated Buck, and he wanted to get by him, and Buck wouldn't let him. I'm doing nothing but holding on for the ride. And you can see his teeth bared. He bit this cow in the nose, turned him around, and put him back the other way. That was his job. And he did it very well. The reason why I brought Buck with me tonight is because Buck was a very hybrid horse. He came from the land of champions, King Ranch in South Texas, where the American Quarter Horse was born. And Buck was one of the last of the lion-bred grandsons of King P234. He was a world champion cutting horse. So he's a very hybrid fellow, and they paid $8,500 for him when he was a youngster. He was the product, though, of a bad divorce between a dentist and his wife. And the lady, to spite her husband, had 4 goons come out and beat him almost to death. She threw him out in the front yard and said, "Here's your horse back." And he lived through it. So he is a classic example of what we're talking about tonight. He and I both met at a time and place where we needed each other. So he was marked for slaughter, and a friend of mine, I say that loosely because he got me in a lot of hot water, called me on the phone and said, "I've got this horse and they're going to kill him, and I really think he's better than this. Can you do something with it? Nobody else can handle it. And he's wild and he's crazy." And so I said, "Sure, bring him out to the ranch." And when they showed up, I really thought I'd bit off more than I could chew, because he was tearing the trailer apart, literally almost destroying himself inside of it. And when we unloaded him, he went into a 100-foot round pen area, pasted himself against the farthest wall, and just stood there and shivered. So, make a long story short, it took me 8 months to get close enough to Buck to touch his face. Year and a half to actually get on his back and ask him to do anything other than buck me off. And 2.5 years to get him into the job that he was born and bred to do, which was to cut, sort, and separate cattle. Did a beautiful job of it. I used Buck for 6.5 years to help me on the ranch, entertain people from all over the world. And to the unknowing public, they thought that he was just this nice little sweet horse that anybody could get on and anybody could handle. Far from the truth. He wouldn't let anybody else on his back. And even though we had come a long way in 6.5 years, you could never put a bit in his mouth. Wasn't going to happen. You could never tie him up, because if you tied him, he would break everything that you tied him to. And he wouldn't do it while you were looking at him. He'd wait till you turned your back, and the very minute, you'd hear the little ping, and there would go the snap that you had him tied to across the arena. So he was a great example of a horse, can relate that to me. Discarded, beat up, abused, thrown to the side. And became a champion.